When you want to make cornbread, whether it's from the box or your own homemade version, don't worry about figuring out which pan to use because you don't need a pan at all. Let me show you how to make a quick and easy cornbread in the Ninja Foodi with no extra accessories. Welcome to the Salted Pepper, where we cook for real life using real food and we keep it real simple. Today I'm going to show you the easiest way to make cornbread in the Ninja Foodi. Now, how do I know that this is the easiest way to make cornbread? Because I've made about 100 different versions of cornbread in the Ninja Foodi over the past 3 years. And I have had the same trouble that a lot of you guys have shared with me that you're experiencing as well. And that is overdone top and underdone center, or the bottom's too soggy, or the top is burnt. It's just really difficult to get that perfect texture of a cornbread using the Ninja Foodi on the bake roast function and having it elevated in some sort of a pan. It's a little bit easier if you use a bundt style pan because you've got that center heating core that's helping to even out everything. But sometimes we don't want to do it that way. Sometimes we want a flat, no hole cornbread. That's what I'm going to show you how to do today. And it's really, really easy. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn on the Ninja Foodi. Even before you mix up your ingredients, you want to get the pot hot. So I'm going to go ahead, turn this on. We're going to turn it on high and just let it go for about 5 or 10 minutes. By that time, we will be ready to start our cornbread. All right, so I'm making a version that is, oh my gosh, so delicious. It is a honey butter cornbread, and it's more cake-like and a little sweeter. So I'm gonna go through, as I go through the ingredients, I'm gonna tell you how to modify them if you like less sweet or a more crumbly texture to your cornbread, okay? So first things first, let me get my milk, which this is half and half, but you could use regular milk if you want, and 1 tablespoon of white vinegar. I'm gonna add those two together to create sort of like a buttermilk. So you could also use buttermilk. You can skip the vinegar in this recipe because I'm using baking powder and not baking soda. But if your recipe calls for baking soda, you do need to make sure that you have some sort of acid in the recipe to activate the soda so it helps to rise your cornbread. So I'm just gonna let this sit. It's kind of thicken and kind of curdle a little bit. Meantime, in my mixing bowl, I'm gonna put in 2 large eggs, 1/2 of a cup of brown sugar, 1/4 cup of white sugar. Now, this is where you can adjust the sweetness to your liking. So as long as you add at least 1/4 cup of the sugar, you will be fine. Now, I like mine on the sweet side, so I'm adding more. I like the combination of the white sugar and the brown sugar, so that is my preference. You could certainly add all brown sugar, all white sugar, use half the amount. That's totally up to you. But you do want a little bit of sweetness in there, so I would at least use 1/4 cup. And then I'm just gonna whisk this up. And the great thing about making cornbread, it's considered a quick bread, kind of like the same sort of principle as a zucchini bread or a banana bread. So quick breads are really quick to whip up and then get them in the oven, or in this case, the Ninja Foodi. They are leavened with the baking soda or baking powder, whichever the recipe calls for, and some eggs in this case. All right, next up, let's go ahead and dump in our flour here. This is 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour. Then I'm gonna add in the cornmeal. This is 1/2 cup of cornmeal. This is where you determine the texture of your cornbread. The more flour you use and the less cornmeal you use, the more cake-like your cornbread's going to be. If you wanted a more crumbly texture, add in more cornmeal and less flour. You want a total of 2 cups, so you could go to 1.25 cup of all-purpose flour and then 3/4 of a cup of the cornmeal if you wanted a little bit crumblier. But I like a cake-like mixture. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and add in 1/2 cup of melted butter to this. I'm gonna add in 1 teaspoon of fine grind sea salt, which I think is important in this recipe. It's just gonna add a nice flavor. And let's see, let's get this. You can even add in some vanilla extract if you wanted. I thought about it, but I decided, no, I'm not gonna do that. All right, now I'm gonna pour in my half and half that has the vinegar in there, and it is going to be curdled and a little bit thicker, and that's perfectly fine. The last thing I usually add, let me get this out here. I wanna make sure I get all of it. And the last thing that I add in, or the two last things I should say, are my baking powder and my corn. So I'm gonna mix this up really well, and then I will add in the baking powder. The reason why I add it last is because I want to get it into the pot pretty quickly to start cooking after I add it in. Now, some people will add it in with the flour, and it's gonna be fine. But if I got distracted right now, I could walk away from this, still add this later, right before I cook it, and it would be perfectly fine. And that's because the baking powder is activated by the liquid. So if you add it too soon, it's gonna activate before you cook it, and then you won't have as good of a rise. All right, so let's get that mixed up. Now I know you're probably saying, what about the honey if this is honey butter? That comes later, okay? All right, so you want a smooth batter, that looks good. Now I'm gonna add in the corn and just sort of fold it in, and we're gonna get this in the Ninja Foodi to start cooking. And this is about 1.5 cups of corn. You could use a can, which I did. I used a 15-ounce can that I drained, or you could use frozen, but you would want to thaw it, of course, first. Or you could skip the corn. The corn's optional too. I think jalapeno slices would be really good in this as well. Or a little corn and a little jalapeno. It'd be delicious. All right, so fold that in. Now, I'm going to go ahead and brush the bottom of the Ninja Foodi inner pot with some pan grease. The ingredients for the pan grease are, I did it differently this time, so we're gonna see how it works out. First, let me turn this heat down a little bit because we're gonna cook on medium. So go ahead and heat on high, turn it down to medium. And usually I use Crisco, but this time I use some butter and flour. I'm hoping it's not gonna burn, so we're gonna just try that here and just get it all around. And that just helps to prevent it from sticking. It doesn't look like it's burning. It is browning, but that adds a nice flavor. I'll go over the ingredients in a minute because I've got to do this pretty quickly or we're going to end up burning something. All right, now just dump in your batter right into the inner pot. And then leave it alone for 10 minutes. So spread it out and leave it alone. All right, so now that we have our cornbread in, we're using sear saute. It's on medium heat. We're gonna let it cook for 10 minutes. That's gonna start cooking the bottom, and then we'll switch over to the bake roast function. So while that's happening, let me talk a little bit about this pan grease, because if you like to make cakes, this is going to be something that you definitely wanna try. The pan grease, now you can make it different ways. Like I tried a different way today, and I'm not sure if it's gonna work out as well. Traditionally, it is a vegetable shortening and oil and flour. And the ratios are 1/4 cup of the oil that you want to use, which could be a vegetable oil. I chose avocado oil today. And sometimes, I'll use different oils. Not an olive oil, that's a little too heavy, but 1/4 cup of oil, 1/2 cup of a vegetable shortening like Crisco, and 1/2 cup of flour. And you just mix it up. So you can use a hand mixer, you can use a stand mixer, or today I just used a spoon and just, made it until it was really smooth. But today I made it a little bit differently. I used butter. So I used 1/2 cup of butter, 1/2 cup of flour, and 1/4 cup of avocado oil. And I wanted to try it out because I always have those ingredients here at my house, but I don't always have the Crisco. So wanted to try it out and see how it worked. I did notice that, of course, when I put it into the hot pan, that butter started to brown. Now, you're not gonna have that problem if you're working with cakes and you're just going straight to baking them. It's not gonna happen. I put this butter into a super hot pan. That's why mine browned. I'm not too worried about it because I think it's gonna add some nice flavor. However, the big thing will be, will the cornbread flip out of this pan like it did for me before? So we're gonna find that out together. So it's been about 10 minutes and I'm seeing exactly what I want to see, which is bubbles along the edges and they're starting to set up. There are a few bubbles in the middle and that's fine, but you're not gonna see as many in the middle as you will along the edges. But that's fine because the crisping lid will take care of the rest of it. So think of this like a big pancake and you want the edges to set, you wanna see the bubbles, and then it's time to put the crisping lid down. So that's what I'm gonna do now. So lower that, we're gonna switch functions to bake roast. You wanna take your temperature down to 300 degrees and hit start. Take your time up to 20 minutes. That is what I found was the perfect timing for this recipe. But now, keep in mind that if you use, let's say Jiffy, the box Jiffy, you probably are gonna want to use 2 or 3 boxes to get the same depth of cornbread that I have in here now. So that's going to make some changes in your timing, but not necessarily in anything else, okay? So if you wanted to just do thin cornbread, you only wanted to use 2 boxes of Jiffy corn mix or 1, whatever you want to do, it's fine. Then you're gonna have less depth and that's going to mean less cook time. So you can still do the same technique, but less time. So let your food tell you when it's done by peeking at it basically every few minutes. You can use a cake tester as well if you want to go into the cornbread, or a butter knife or something like that. And of course, if it comes out dry, that indicates that it is done. So we're gonna let this go for about 15 minutes, and that's when I start to check on it and look at the browning on the top. Let's give it a little peek here. It looks good. Looks really good. Let's see. Feels just a little bit soft. I am not getting too much browning. It is browning up nicely, but it's not burning. If you saw that it was getting too brown, back your temperature down 25 or 50 degrees. But I think we're good to go. I'm gonna go another couple of minutes here just to make sure that everything is set up, and then we will proceed to the next step. Okay, so I let the rest of the 5 minutes go. So we baked at 300 for 20 minutes, and now it looks perfect. Yep, and it's a little bit firmer. So what I do is I use my cake tester, and the one that I have has like this little plastic end to it. Now you could use a different type of tool. You just want to make sure it's non-stick if you're using the ceramic coated pot. And then I just go around the edges, just like you would with a cake, to just sort of loosen them up, make sure that nothing is sticking to the side, which it does not look like it is at all. And then what you can do is just let it cool for a few minutes. Sometimes I'll even take the pot out of the Ninja Foodi to let it cool, and that's what I'm gonna do right now. And then we'll flip it onto a cooling rack and we'll get the honey butter onto the bottom so that it soaks through the cornbread as it continues to cool. So after about 5 minutes or so, now we are ready to turn this over onto our cooling rack. So to do that, the easiest way that I found is to put the cooling rack on top like this. You could also do this with a large plate if you don't have a cooling rack, but I like to use the cooling rack because I like the way that it will allow airflow to go through and cool both sides at the same time. All right, so let's go ahead. We're gonna do a quick flip. Now, there are never any guarantees in life, so I really hope that we didn't break on the way down. And we did not. Perfect. All right, it looks gorgeous. I mean, absolutely gorgeous. Now it's up to you if you flip it back over or if you serve it this side up. It's totally fine either way. What I like to do is now put on the honey butter. So to do that, I just poke some holes, and I use my cake tester again, and I just go through and just poke holes here all the way around. You could use a brush to brush on the honey butter, or you could just pour it on, spoon it on, whatever you want to do. All right, that looks good. I flip mine because after I put the holes in it, it doesn't look as attractive. I have 2 tablespoons of honey, 3 tablespoons of butter that is melted. Now I'm just gonna mix them together and spoon it on top. And what this does is as the cornbread, because it's still warm inside, it will start to absorb this mixture and it just gives a really nice flavor. And it's super moist. All right, so once it's well mixed, then I just take it and spread it over. Then I let the cornbread cool completely. And then I'll flip it back over onto the plate and we can serve it. All right, that looks perfect. And now just let it cool completely and then you can cut and serve it. Now, if you wanted to serve it warm, you certainly can. But I like to let it cool down so that all of that honey butter absorbs and it's so, so delicious. So in about, I would say 15 minutes, we'll be ready to cut into it and I'll give it a taste. So it's been about 15 minutes, I would say, and it is still slightly warm, which is perfectly fine. The big thing is that it's not tacky or sticky. All of that honey butter has absorbed in. So now we can turn it over to our plate. And I do it the exact same way. I set the plate on top and then just do a flip. I don't know why I'm putting these on. It's not hot. I guess it's habit. And then really quick flip. Take this off, and then you have your cornbread, just like that. Oh, it looks so good. Looks so good. Of course, you could drizzle it with some more honey butter if you wanted. You could serve it on the other side if you wanted to. It's totally up to you. All right, so most important thing, texture and taste. So let's go ahead and cut into it. It looks good. It looks really good. Oh my gosh, it looks wonderful. It's perfectly cooked all the way through. And it just, oh my gosh, it looks so amazing. All right, let me give it a little taste here. Oh my goodness. It is absolutely delicious. And believe it or not, it is not overly sweet. It has a slight taste of the honey. You get those corn kernels, which I happen to love. And it is so moist. It's incredible. Perfect. And guess what? This doesn't have to just be for cornbread. If you want to make another type of quick bread or a little cake or something, try this technique out. I bet it's gonna work just beautifully for you. As always, make it yours, make it delicious, and keep it real.